Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Gaslit Truth podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest, therapist Jen, here with my good friend and co-host,
Dr. Tara Lynn.
Dr. T. And we are here today with a very, very special guest. And before we introduce that special guest from the other side of the globe here, which is way cool, what I do want to talk a little bit about is how you reach out to us. We are very easy to find on all the socials. So if you're on the Facebook or I always have to put the in front of everything. It's like going to the Walmart. I don't know why I do that, but you're on the Instagram. It's right. It just feels right. I don't know. But if you're on any of those socials, come on and find us. Terry and I are both on TikTok, but then the Gaslit Truth podcast has things on Facebook, and we are on Instagram, and we're also on a YouTube page. And if you're old school and you want to send us an email, and you don't prefer to DM and you want to send us something, you can send us an email to thegaslittruthpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you like, subscribe, give us the stars. You can message us. So we're starting to get messages from people still in the United States yet, but from all over the US, which is kind of cool, giving us feedback about our podcast. And so we can't do it without you guys. This is why we do what we do. So without further ado, I'm going to let Dr. Terry introduce our guest for today.
Hopefully I can muddle my way through this intro, but I'm really excited to have Dr. Kendra Campbell on the show. Dr. Campbell is your free range founder, TikTok's first holistic psychiatrist. I remember seeing you on TikTok and I was like, she's mine. Yes, love it. And one of the only Ivy League trained physicians in the world to publicly, unapologetically, and loudly voice the indisputable reality that the entire traditional model of mental health care is fundamentally flawed and, in my opinion, should just be flushed down the toilet and started all over again. Welcome, Dr. Kendra Campbell, to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's so lovely. Welcome to see you guys in person, or see you guys virtually in person.
Yeah, I know, because we've been following each other on TikTok for quite a while.
Yeah.
So at least I've been following you, I think, probably longer than you've been following me. However, when I saw your stuff, I was like, there's actually a psychiatrist out there that feels the same way. It was so validating. And it's just so validating that you're validating other people's lived experience. I want to say alternative, but I don't think these experiences are alternative.
No.
No, it's the norm.
It is the norm.
Yeah, not normal, but the norm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that. Not normal, but the norm, because you're right. So how do you handle, you get a lot of backlash, or anyways, you used to. I think you don't so much anymore, because I think when you've developed an audience, they want to see your stuff, right? So, there still is backlash. So I just kind of want to know how you handle that backlash.
Yeah, it's so funny, because I was just thinking about this morning, because I left a comment on some random person's profile on Instagram, and now my comment has like 7,000 likes on it. And
wow.
And about like a good 30% of it is like really serious hate, because it's not a platform that I'm normally on. So it's like they don't know me, so they love to hate on me. I honestly, I can actually say honestly, authentically love it when people like hate. I love it when people send me angry or blame me or whatever, because for me, it's all like, what's that thing? Grist for the mill or whatever. It's just, it's interesting. It's interesting to me. Like, it's interesting what I say. And then people have very strong emotional reactions to that. And as a psychiatrist, I love analyzing, actually, like, I wonder why this person, I said this and this person's going off on this. So I can tell that they were probably injured like this, like, can kind of even see
that's
like,
the truth. Yeah,
that is the truth. I
can see where the pain is coming from,
it.
Right? And it's and that's what it is to me. Hate is just a form of pain that people are kind of spewing externally, right? It's just like saying, I'm in pain and I'm going to project that pain onto you. So it doesn't bother me. Honestly, I kind of even enjoy it a little bit. And I will say that I do.
I went through a little of that last night too. So I was like, I'm not going to reply. And I'm like, oh, it's just too intriguing for me. And like, I just have to tell you guys that you're really not considering other things.
One thing that I really love to do, I rarely have time to do this, but is to actually like go into a conversation with this person and really get into it, like into like this therapeutic space, like holding this therapeutic safe space for them. And literally we'll go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And by the end of it, they're crying and they're saying, oh, I'm sorry for what I said and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like you can have like that effect on a total stranger. And, you know, just a random stranger that happened to send this little message and I can help them in some way. And to me, that is so super cool. Like, why not do that?
So it's funny because I'm much bigger on TikTok than I am on any other platform. But on Instagram, I'm starting to pick up speed in the wrong way, like in all the wrong ways. And same thing is happening. Like suddenly I'm in front of this audience that is just not liking the message, you know? But I'm still trying to sit with that because I remember on TikTok it happened the same way, you know, like originally like, oh, you know, it's so divisive, right? And so I'm like, all right, eventually people will calm down. But what I noticed was, well, it's either women, they look like middle-aged women, I can't tell, but you know, their profile picture look like middle-aged women, or young people, like early 20s, mid 20s, have subscribed to this I don't know, psychiatric medication will save you mentality. And to me, that is so incredibly frightening, that they believe the answer to their problems is in the bottom of a pill bottle. That freaks me out a lot.
Yeah. And alongside of that, their diagnosis, right? Their diagnosis is their life. It is their identity. It is
oh my gosh.
And often I see, especially in the younger, like 20 population, you were talking about young 20, they will put like, you know, BPD, MDD, like, you know, they put like all their
bio.
In their bio. Yeah. And to me, that's just, it's profound. It's profound that we, you know, that we are in this world where that people feel so strongly about a medical diagnosis as being like their actual identity in life. But it really is. It's the lens through which they see everything.
It is. And how those labels box them in, right? Because it really will silo you in terms of how much you're willing to consider the type of information, especially in the mental health field where it is so very siloed. You know, I think that there's like something that feels really good to finally like I've got a label on me. So now I understand what's happening. It makes so much sense. The last how many years of my life, right? Like are now encompassed on this like ADHD label, or the neurodivergent community is very strong. Like they love you, Terry.
They do not love me.
The addiction community loves me right now.
But they don't love me either.
Yeah, I know. No, they really. I'm being sarcastic.
I know.
I'm not tell this stuff, right? Like I'm in a big fight with a bunch of people in the addiction community right now, as of like 8 a.m. yesterday. Okay, but that label feels good, I think, for people, right? Because now I've explained it, but boy, does it silo you in your ability to see other alternatives. Then, especially here when we're looking at our Western culture and the way the Western medicine, like you've put yourself on that label, you've got the diagnostic label and all of the bullets that go with it, explains everything, and interventions then fall under what we do here best, which is psychiatry. You know, that's
to me, it's just such a doom thing. You're doomed too. That's what, you know, psychiatry and most of psychology is. Once you have this label, this is a label for life. So it also just says like, you know, it's never going to get better. You're not going to get better, and literally just squashes their hope to the point where I make content where I'm saying people can heal, you can heal, and people hate that. Right?
I know.
Because they're the cognitive dissonance of me saying, yes, you could actually heal, when they're like living in this world of no, this is their life and there's nothing that they can do about it. Like that really, you know, upsets them, you know?
Yeah. The resistance to healing
exactly.
is profound in anybody that's in the mental health space, most people, until it's not. But to get to the place where you're like, I can see my healing, it's like crawling out of a deep dark hole that you can't, you know, grab onto anything because there's no guidance to do it. But this idea that these, especially the younger kids, I worry about a lot, because if you're listening to this and you're a younger person, I just want to say you're not supposed to know who you are when you're in your 20s. Like this is part of growth. You're not supposed to label and identify. You're not
still don't know who the hell I am.
I'm 55. My goodness, I have no idea. Like you're not supposed to know, and you're not supposed to box yourself in either. And by the way, your 20s are largely uncomfortable. They're
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, we got a Dr. T, you froze on us.
Very uncomfortable.
Oh. Yeah, you're back. Okay, hang on. You're back.
Sorry. I don't know what happened.
You're fine.
Anyway, I think it's this idea of that we don't like discomfort. And so we need to solve any level of discomfort that comes our way. And maybe that solution is a diagnosis, but most people don't even know, especially the younger people, when you get those diagnoses, how that can impact your life futuristically and not in a good way. Not in a good way. The forever fighting for yourself will be profound.
Yeah. And I work with all ends of the spectrum. Like I've worked from little kids down to, all the way to the elderly. And I've seen the lifespan of what happens when someone is diagnosed as a child, and then they carry that diagnosis, they're medicated, and then what their life looks like when they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And it's not a beautiful thing, actually. It's pretty sad what that trajectory is on medications and sticking to that, well, I can't get any better, and what that does to your life. It's really so disempowering.
It is.
Yes.
It is. I wonder, and I think our listeners too wonder a little bit about this. Can you tell us, Kendra, how did you get to this space where you decided traditional psychiatry, the degrees, the labels, everything I've gotten, the education I'm not doing this, and it's actually harmful? How'd you get there?
Yeah, it's a little interesting story. So I graduated undergrad with a degree in psychology. And you can't really get many jobs with a bachelor's.
I'm so sorry that you did that.
Go back and go, shit. That was really dumb.
So the only job I could find was working as a psychiatric technician in a state psychiatric hospital. I was actually on the super acute unit. So I saw a lot of stuff there, and it was my job to be with the patients 24/7. I was a psych tech. So I knew everything that was happening with them. I talked to them about their trauma, everything. And then I would see the psychiatrist come in for 3 minutes maybe, and have a conversation, and then decide to make a change on their medication, which I also observed these changes in their medication didn't often actually do the thing that they were supposed to do. Often people felt much worse and were continually complaining of the side effects. Of course, no one wanted to take the medications. And I feel bad for this, but it was my job where I actually would convince people who didn't want to take their meds to take their meds. That was kind of my job.
Convincing. It's the convincing.
I was really good at convincing them, and I feel bad about that now, but that's what I did. And then it was interesting. So that was the beginning. So somewhere after working there for about 2 or 3 years, I basically said, you know what? I'm going to go to medical school. I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to become a psychiatrist, just so I can figure out, because maybe there's something that they know that I don't know. Because I kept thinking, to me, it seems pretty obvious. These people have a lot of trauma. To me, it was just trauma was the big thing. They're all just heavily traumatized, and the medications aren't doing anything to heal the trauma. And in fact, I would argue that they do the opposite. Yeah. And so, but I was but I'm just a little 20-year-old nothing. What do I know? So let me just go do this. And so I can at least see what I should know and see what their perspective is. And that's literally why I went to med school. So I went to med school, and then I did psychiatry residency. And somewhere during that process, so the whole medical education system is a brainwashing machine. I'm sure you guys know this. It is literally they sleep deprive you, food deprive you, they berate you. It's all the same things that the military uses, in boot camp and stuff like that. And so it's just, you're primed to be brainwashed. So anything they say, and they say it so many times, and they say it so it is this, they say it like it's gospel, right? This mental illness is this, and this medication will help this. And so I did kind of buy into it. I will say not 100%. I was never 100% this is good, but I bought into it just enough that I, after residency, decided to continue to work in traditional psychiatry. I started working and running an emergency room in New York City. And the long and short of it is that there, I just saw it even more, right? Because I saw the revolving door of people coming in, and what would happen when they would get the medication, and what happens when you give a suicidal person an antidepressant, and all these things I was just seeing. And I couldn't unsee that. And at the same time, my own health was getting worse and worse and worse and worse in this environment. And my mental health was horrible. I was on medications. It was just a wreck. And I eventually came off of all the medications that I was on, which was a whole process. I found holistic medicine, it came off. And then basically I realized after that, I was I can't do this anymore. And the day that I found out that I was pregnant with my daughter was the day that I heard this voice. Actually, it may have been her voice, I don't know, but I heard a voice that said, leave, don't come back. This is not it. And so that's what I did. I literally called my boss and said, I'm not coming back to work tomorrow. And I know it was like, and I had like, and I was doing more shifts than anybody else. So it was like, they were like, what? And I left New York City and I moved to Virginia, and that's where I founded Free Range. And then basically since then, I have only been working with people. I work with people mostly who are looking to come off of psychiatric medications. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, I'm privy to like really like the depths and the darkness and the despair and the injuries and the suffering that happen to people when they're on these meds and when they can't get off of these meds. And so that just sort of reinforced everything. And basically to the point where right now, I mean, you could probably just call me an anti-psychiatrist, I guess. I'm a psychiatrist who is an anti-psychiatrist because I really don't, I've completely gone off on another land that is not anything related to traditional psychiatry at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also want to make the point, what med school did you go to?
I went to Ross University.
Okay. Didn't you? So what's the Ivy League trained then?
Columbia.
Columbia.
I actually did 2 fellowships at Columbia, one in emergency psychiatry, and then one in public psychiatry, which is mostly working with people with serious mental illness, psychotic psychosis, chronic psychosis, and things like that.
Right. So when we're talking to Kendra, like she is highly trained in psychiatry from the best training that one could ever ask for. Yeah. And so it's so interesting to hear you talk about like the light bulb moment, because I had a light bulb moment, and my light bulb moment was driving home in the car. And it was I could medicate myself and stay in this job, or I could quit my job. And I quit my job that day. Although I did give notice, by the way. I gave notice. I probably shouldn't have, but I did. Right. Exactly. Haha. I gave I wasn't as ballsy as Kendra. I know I was not as ballsy as Kendra to not give notice and not show up. But anyway, but it's so funny because once that light bulb is like ding and it goes on, you can't shut it off. Like no matter how hard you want to suppress it, you just can't. Yes. Because we can't unsee and unknow the things that we see with our own eyes. Yeah. And the things that we have felt internally being on medication and then off, like we can't just not unknow that stuff anymore. Yeah. And I think that's the powerful place to be, is that traditionally you go to a doctor and they don't want you to believe that any of that is happening as a result of the psychiatric or other medication that you're taking. Exactly. And so that's where the gaslit truth came from, actually, is this whole idea that we shouldn't listen to ourselves, but we really need to start listening to ourselves and paying very, very close attention. And Jen is going through something similar right now as we speak.
Yeah. Yeah. When you said the word brainwash, it actually took me back to, so Terry and I have talked about this before. We were in that very similar position. We went through the institution and the schooling and did all of those things, and then found ourselves, for me, it was in a state funded, state-run facility. Terry was in there as well. It's actually how I met her back in the day, because it was the only job I could get. I couldn't
to get licensure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay. And so I found myself there going, I have to get licensed. And if I can find somewhere that's going to help license me and I actually get a paycheck along with it too, that's cat's ass, right? Like it's not going to get any better than that, right? So in 100. That process, though, was a lot of brainwashing, because I perpetuated, without knowing, right? I was not volitionally trying to harm people, but I was that therapist that sat and talked about medications. Shit, I knew more about them probably than the psychiatrist, because I was with the patient all the time. So that's the piece that you have that you were talking about too, right? They get their 15 minutes and we've got 15 hours in a week with them, right? And it's like I could see the symptomology that they struggled with even with these medications, but it was like, well, maybe it's only been a couple weeks, you've got to give it more time, or let's reach out to psychiatry, right? Maybe we need a different dose, or perhaps the side effect, like the idea of the side effect being connected to like the original medication and it not being just a brand new manifestation, that was like foreign. Wasn't like part of the language that was spoken to us, right? And so when you said that, that the idea, that word brainwash, I think just fits so much. And I think there's probably a lot of clinicians that are listening now to this that I'm hoping are getting curious about that idea. The idea that these labels are generated from a lot of conflicts of interest, and yet we keep handing them to people and they mean everything. And so brainwashing, I think, is something that a lot of people can resonate with, because we were, oh my God, sleep deprived, couldn't pay for food. I mean, my God, I couldn't even figure out how to pay for my education, and eating ramen noodles every single day for 6 months because I couldn't pay my rent. Like, you think about the process of just to get to where we are, for many of us wasn't just smooth sailing. Oh my God. Like, and then it's like, why the hell God, I can't get a job with this one. I guess got to go get another degree. And you just fall farther and farther down that rabbit hole. And then you find yourself saying to people, meds are the way.
Yeah.
This is what you need.
And then
better,
Yeah. And then what happens for most people though is they get stuck there. They get stuck there because they don't know that people like us exist. They don't know that there's this whole other world actually that thinks differently, and that so many other possibilities exist. And so they get stuck. Like, I see this all the time. People send me emails and stuff like that. Like, I'm in this job, I'm doing this, but how do I get out? Like, how do I do what you do? How do I, and it's because it's not easy to leave. To leave. Like, for me, it was the golden handcuffs too. Like, I had all these benefits. My kids could go to Columbia for free. Like,
same, not Columbia, but
yeah, it was great. But
same. We're in the same position.
State service, all the things.
But I knew that it wasn't worth it. All of that wasn't worth it.
So I want to talk a little bit about manipulative language, if you don't mind, because you did mention it a little bit earlier about some of the things that we say to gain compliance.
Oh yeah, you do a lot of videos on this too. You have several videos that you have put out literally that say that, and you list off like the manipulative language. Yeah, which is pretty cool. Oh, see, she's going to ask you a question, and then I interrupt, and then she freezes.
I don't know what my connection is doing right now. So
you look good, Terry. It's fine.
As long as I'm not frozen with a weird face, I'm cool. But
you're not picking your nose. Just don't pick your nose at all. You'll be fine.
If I freeze, just keep talking. I'll be back.
I will. Don't worry.
Okay. So Jen and I have talked about this, and I have openly said that I struggle with a lot of shame around some of the things that I have told people. Not, maliciously, again, I think Jen has mentioned that in here today. But just because that's what we were trained to do. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, right? Like, you should be thinking for yourself. Well, but when you're trained to think like the group, and this is how you do something for your own liability for whatever reason, we engage in a lot of manipulation tactics, mostly for medication use and compliance. So even down to the words that we use, and I wanted to bring this up because Jen, she mentioned her recent TikTok that she had. She blatantly said, I have an addiction. And it was, I have an addiction to Lexapro, is what she said. And man, the claws came out in her comment section.
The last 24 hours, every time I open it up, I'm like, oh my God, there's another one, right? Like 60 comments just like that about how wrong I am. And the inability for people to even put that word on this experience, and how addicted my brain is to that SSRI, and what the tolerance I'm going through, with the terrible withdrawals that I'm going through as I'm tapering, and that community doesn't seem to care for that language at all. No. It's like, I used a word that, because I'm not a heroin addict, or I'm not addicted to alcohol or any other drugs, like, I get, this is legal, so therefore this isn't an addiction. This is just dependence. You're all these semantics, right? So
I have content on that as well, and also got a lot of hate as well from saying that. But that's actually my belief, is that, I do believe that one can be addicted to SSRIs for sure. It needs to. I actually have a masterclass where I go into the details of this, like line by line, about how you if you look at the criteria for according to the DSM, which I don't really believe in, but if you look at the DSM criteria,
but we're still going to hinge on it for this conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's because people can they seem to. This is the one thing that they can understand is this dumb freaking book. So it's like, okay, let's use the terms then.
And in that book, if you go line by line, the criteria for addiction, and you take somebody on an SSRI that can't get off, it's check. They actually meet the criteria. And yes, we have a horrible connotation with them, but that's the horrible connotation is not. It just is what it is, right? And I understand, I get it, because it's like this idea that a doctor gave it to me, and and people just don't want to use that word. But the reality is, it is an addiction, in my opinion. And I know many of the clients that I have worked with, and just other colleagues, are actually believe that it was an important part of their healing journey when they actually came out with that, where they said, you know what, I am addicted to this, and by acknowledging that. And then letting that sort of just simmer and grow and heal through that, it was actually very healing for them to have that acknowledgement, but if what we resist persists. So
right. That. And that's exactly what I tried to put a video out on this, and I was talking, Terry's like, oh, she must've been watching it, right? She's like, you're getting all kinds of shit. And I'm like, I haven't been on this in hours. She's like, you need to, look at it. And it really is, it's, a lot of people that, and I don't know where the frustration or I'm not sure where it all comes from for many people, but what I'm noticing is a lack of understanding beyond the word addiction, or beyond the word withdrawal, or beyond the word tolerance, or beyond the word dependence. It's like we are hinged on this label, but all the meaning behind it. Right. The idea that I'm so scared because I can't live without this right now. Mm-hmm. I truly cannot.
You can't have an addiction for something that you need, Jen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so unbelievable that when we're talking about semantics, we're talking about manipulative language, right? And I think about this idea of all the years that I said to people, this is not something that's addictive. This medication is going to be helpful, right? I said that all the time. And I'm sitting in this, and I went through the DSM a week ago, and I've been having some come to Jesus as myself with my process of what I'm going through. And one of them was looking at that going, I am all of this. Mm-hmm. I am every single one of these things. I can't live without this, because if I don't have it, I'm going to go into some really bad spaces, which I already have a few times. Right. So that is addiction, right? And to be able to admit that yourself is I think it is very healing. I did that video just on the whim, but really when I look back on it, it's it's part of the healing process, is to look at this as something that's really impacting my life in the way that it is. But the semantics behind it aren't acceptable. I can't carry the addiction title because I'm not a heroin addict. I can't carry that title. And this was given to me legally. Yeah. This was given to me by somebody in a white coat who I have to trust. So therefore you can't fall under that criteria.
Yeah. And I think it also hits on that topic of personal responsibility, which there's a lot of people, when you bring up that they're personally responsible for anything in their life, get a lot of anger coming to you for saying stuff like that. And it is both, right? So to be started on a psychiatric medication, there probably was gaslighting by a psychiatrist. There was manipulation. So it's not like that didn't exist. That happened. And that's a big piece of this as well. And also you agreed to be on that medication. And while I'm not blaming somebody for that, there is, once that happens and once you become dependent upon it, there is a level of personal responsibility. Not blame, not it's your fault, not you should have known better, not judgment, but just personal responsibility and accepting of what is.
Yeah.
And then, because if you have that personal responsibility, that then gives you empowerment, right? That gives you, if I'm personally responsible now, I can do something about it.
Yeah. And what I'm curious for you too, when it comes to the idea of informed consent, when it goes along with that, what should that look like in your opinion? you know, I'm just kind of curious to know, because I think there's a lot of patients that you see too over years and years and years in time, and they've probably taken medications for a very, very long time. And the conversations that they have with their providers are probably very simple. They probably are not, okay, are you ready to get off? And it's more, okay, you're doing good. Great. I'll see you in a year.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm curious to know about that. And it's kind of a twofold question. Like, how do we encourage people to view it differently? Because I do think that's the level of personal responsibility as well. Like, we almost owe it to ourselves to look at this from a different lens.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? You know, when you don't even know it exists.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's about like trying to find this podcast and our channels and people writing books. And that's what I always encourage people to do. Like, go out and read, because the information is really starting to be out there. So yeah, it is not an easy thing to do, to go and educate yourself on all this, but it is, I think, our personal responsibility for our health to do that. Right. We're no longer living in an era, or that really never was a good era to live in, but where it's just like you go to the doctor and they, give you something and you just say, okay, the doctor gave it to me, I take it. Like, we have to, move towards this. Well, it's both things. I believe that the doctors need like a whole revolution and a change in learning so that they actually can give informed consent, because they don't give anything close to informed consent right now. I know what I was taught to say was, I don't even like to repeat some of the things that I was taught to say.
I think you should.
Yeah.
I
would love if you did, because boy, would people want to hear some of that.
The most important thing I would say about informed consent, when I was told about, discussing the risks of any drug before, was that this was the big mantra, was like, don't tell them anything. Don't tell them any of the risks, because then they're going to have them. That was the big thing.
I've heard this
right?
before. Like, you're going to put it in their head that they have these things.
If you tell them that they might have this side effect, then they're going to come back. And actually, there is some truth to that. But that's not an excuse. That is not a reason to withhold or be dishonest with someone about a powerful drug that has potentially lethal consequences. That is not the time to not be transparent. Right,
You want to know what that is to me when I think about this? I'm like, guys, that just goes back to the power of the mind. And if the power of the mind can make you worse, it can definitely then make you better.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why, like, I don't know if you've seen any of my videos about like the placebo, or if you've read that book. I can't forget. There's a really good book, but anyway, it goes over like the Kirsch studies, the Kirsch meta-analyses, where they were did a meta-analysis of all these other studies, looking at the placebo effect. And they found that basically, if you account for all the different variables and everything like that, essentially the placebo effect is as strong as the medication effect. Yeah. So they're essentially like kind of one and the same. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So yeah.
If you had a perfect world when it comes to prescribing.
She freezes. Okay, I'm going to try to guess.
What would that look like?
Oh, wait, are you back? Because otherwise I'm going to guess the other half of your question.
Am I back?
You're back. Here you go. You're back.
Okay. If in a perfect world, when it comes to prescribing, what would it look like?
Okay, so let me first not answer your question, and then I'll answer your question.
Sure.
By not answering your question, in my perfect world, there wouldn't really even be a need for psychiatric medication, or very, very, very rarely. If like all of these beautiful, wonderful, magical, mythical things that I believe in could actually come to life, I don't even know that we would ever need them. But if we are going to prescribe them, I would do it how I still do in my practice. And I'll tell you what the response has been with this. So in my practice, if somebody is asking, usually most people are not asking to, but it comes up to start a psychiatric medication, I give them everything. Just like 100%. I tell them all of the risks. What are the potential benefits? I go into extensive detail about the risks, what could happen. I go into dependence. I go into withdrawal. I talk about like how it's going to change your life, what it does, numbing of emotions. I make sure I tell them that some of these side effects can be permanent. Movement disorders, PSSD, like this is not all things that could even, like, you may stop the medication and they may continue. And though here's the potential benefit in your case. Now, what do you want to do? And essentially, pretty much, I think 100% of the time, they have said, okay. Oh, and I forgot the other part of informed consent. The other part of informed consent that's important is not just talking about the risks and benefits of the drug, but the risks and benefits of all your other alternatives. So that's what I do as well. I say we could change up your diet, get you to start exercising, blah, 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 blah. And here's the risks and benefits with that option. And like to date, pretty much everyone says, I'm going with door number 2.
Yeah.
Because if you had all of the options and knew the risks and benefits in both, it would be very odd, I think, that you'd want to choose medication over the other alternatives.
Yes.
There's always that conversation about, taking psych meds is no different than a diabetic taking insulin, right? However, even if you have type 2, and clearly that is a type 2 diabetic statement.
She just keeps freezing. I think it's cute.
And I think I do know what I think I know where she's going, but
yeah, I don't know. She's
sorry.
Listen, Turlin.
I'll try to click all
your internet
out.
There is just, I
don't know what's going on.
Kendra's halfway across the globe and she's just fine here. So I don't know what's going on with you in the States, but this is a problem.
So anyway, if you're even if you have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, or type 2 diabetes, or even type 1 diabetes, like people, not even type 1 diabetes, but if you go to the doctor and they say pill or lifestyle, I do believe most people choose lifestyle first. They choose nutrition because it's, to me, if it's offered as an option, it's not always offered as an option though, but when it is offered, I do believe people will choose the lifestyle factors first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing you probably see some of that, in your practice. Like, are there things? You're cutting in and out, Terry. So I just totally talked over you because you're delayed and it's hard to hear you. Okay. I'm curious to know, like, are there interventions that you offer that when people come to you, so you're just talking about the risk benefits alternatives, right, of the psychiatric medications, but then also risk benefits of the alternatives that you're going to offer, right? Are there things that are like big ticket, like treatment interventions that you do that most people have not heard of, or that really surprise them? That you offer for people when they're trying to deprescribe?
Yes. Yeah, and actually, I'll go a little bit further. Sometimes they have heard about them, but they didn't really understand. Like, for example, my probably one of the number one things, like my big favorite thing in the world is like magnesium, because of farming, how the modern farming practices, we're not getting magnesium. So you could actually have the best diet in the world and still you're probably not going to get enough magnesium. And so magnesium is required for over 800 and some cellular processes. It's everything, our nervous system, our energy, everything is magnesium. And so when you're deficient in that, you're going to have all these things. You're going to have all the mental health problems and lots of high blood pressure, all kinds of things. And it's such an easy fix. It's just such an easy thing. I just have to give you magnesium, and then all of a sudden your body's going to work. So it's like this very dramatic thing too, which is why I love using it. I always start with that because it's dramatic, and then they see that and they're like, oh my God, okay, this doctor knows what she's talking about. I'm going to keep doing it. But often what I find is that they may have like heard about magnesium or even tried it, but I don't know why, but I guess like a lot of the information out there is inaccurate. So they tried like the wrong type of magnesium, or they took like 100 milligrams and they thought that was a trial. I dose 800 to 1200 milligrams. Mm-hmm. So it's like often it's like they may have heard of these things, but they may not have like really heard of them in the way that I'm going to present them and offer them. Even the same thing with exercise. Everybody's heard of exercise. Like most people know that exercise can probably make me feel better, but do they know that like this specific type that I'm going to recommend to you to do, like, just for 5 minutes a day for a week is going to like shift so much in your life, like just this one little practice. So that's what I have found. And yeah, most people are very surprised, actually. I mean, they're shocked. They just come back like, how did that work? Yeah, and then there's also like the grieving of like, I didn't know this for 35 years. If I had known this 35 years ago,
I've so done that.
All I needed was to take a little magnesium at bedtime. I could have, Yeah. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think we run these risks of one pill, one ill, even when it comes to supplementation, right? So I watch forums, I hear about it from my own clients all the time. What works for this, know? And
I get that all the time. They always, what's the natural alternative to Lexapro? And I'm like,
oh gosh,
it's not a natural
lifestyle.
Hey, when you figure that out, let me know, Kendra.
Yeah. But I them because this is their deprogramming. So actually I have anyway, I'm building something where on this I'm going to be offering to the public soon. But anyway, because a part of the process of the clients that I work with now is also helping them to deprogram. And and this is a big piece of it, right? Is to them to understand, like come to these understandings that, whoa, okay, wait a second, pill for every ill. That's not it. It's big, much, much, much bigger than that. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to do something completely different here.
Yeah. Yeah. You said the word lifestyle. And how to, Terry and I have talked a lot about like the idea of deprescribing not only medications, right, but like deprescribing a lifestyle. And I have been so much on this train in my head in the last couple of months, and what I'm trying myself, and it's pretty amazing how which it takes a lot of work, right? Like the pill is very simple, like that is just one of the most simplest things in the world to do. And so there's this whole other piece of being able to get yourself to that space where you have to. I mean, for me, it was kind of like accepting I'm going to have to nurture all of these other areas actually more than I ever have.
Yeah.
And most of them are really truly those big lifestyle patterns, when it comes to nurturing your sleep and your nutrition and understanding movement or exercise, and really bring in a lot of like meditation and mindfulness and like other holistic adaptogenic ideas. Like you've got to be willing to try to bring some of that in, because it's not one thing, it's that lifestyle change.
Never just one thing.
Yeah.
And I think when starting to understand that is the big piece. That's where I see like when my clients are like start to have this major transformation is when they like start to really get that, and then they like get excited about it, and then like, I find that interesting too. Like in the work that I do, there are like a couple of other psychiatrists who do deprescribing, but currently right now, I could be wrong, but as far as all I know, that I'm myself and the other psychiatrist at Free Range, Dr. Demir, are the only two psychiatrists I think that are taking patients right now in the world that do the deprescribing really well. Like we're really good. We're super good at knowing how to like deprescribe and get people off. But that is just a little piece of what we do. Like the rest of it is what's really the work that we're doing, which is to actually heal the things and do the lifestyle stuff and everything like that, so that people can come off. And I get that comment a lot as well. Like, okay, so to get off Lexapro, how many times I take 10 milligrams and 5 milligrams?
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, that's a piece of it.
But there's so much more that you're missing, right? Yeah. I mean, we can give you the chart and you can go through your percentages and on your 46 step taper program, right? But if you're not actually doing all of the other lifestyle pieces to it, it's not going to be as effective, if not possibly not effective. Because
I would argue that it would be easier to just address whatever caused you to take the medication in the first place than to deprescribe.
Yeah.
Right? Like in the beginning, if we would just address that, now we're dealing with, chemical imbalances.
Yes.
That are created from the medication. All of that on top of now still going back and dealing with what you didn't deal with in the first place.
And that's the conversation I always have with people. And that's why I have a policy that's 1 month minimum of 1 month, but ideally more to like 3 or 6 months. I don't even touch the medications. And we're just working on those two things, healing the two things, healing whatever started this in the first place, which usually is not healed because it's been just covered up by the medication and it's kind of simmering and getting worse over time. And then also the taking of the medication, which causes vitamin deficiencies, gut dysbiosis, disconnection, like all these different things are now compounded on top of the original thing. And so, now you have the chemical dependence and how do we get you off that? So it's quite a lot.
It is.
Yeah, like I said, it would be way easier, you guys, to just deal with the shit that brought
I know.
you into
If
the
I could have
doctor in
just
the first
dealt
place.
with that asshole that dumped me when I was 19 years old for my friend instead of going in and getting meds. Well, shit.
That would have been a lot easier.
It is 100%.
Right? It's the stupidest thing when I say it, but it is a reality.
I would have never would have started. Like, it's
Yeah. And well, I don't know if you know my story at all, Kendra, but when I started antidepressants, it was a preventative for postpartum depression. I wasn't even depressed, but yet they put me on it. And I'm like, looking back on that now, I should have ran the other way, but I didn't because the language, like, you're going to save yourself and your child, essentially.
That's what they
You
say.
know,
You're a
you're
bad
gonna be
mom
able
if
to
you don't take it. Like literally.
exactly.
That's
Oh
word
yeah.
for word.
Oh yeah.
That's what I got.
Mhm.
What kind of mom are you going to be without it, Jen? That was the exact
Mhm.
words I got twice. I'm like, yeah, okay. So yeah, that's
So probably because I have something to say, it's going to cut me off. So, I
probably.
think about the stigma of mental health, right? And I think about how maybe I'm an outlier here, but I don't think the stigma of mental health exists anymore in the way that we keep talking about it. And so we get slammed a lot by talking about, what medications do to people as stigmatizing mental health care. Yeah, I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely not. And exactly, we live in a world right now where it's almost the opposite. Like, people are
Yes.
advertising that they have neurodivergence, ADHD, and everything on their TikTok page. Like, that's not
Right.
like a stigma thing. That's like, I'm proud of this. Like,
Yes,
I feel
right.
like we've almost gone in that direction so far.
Mhm.
And so, no, I understand that that's coming up for the people, but not in the least bit. I believe that what we are doing by offering people hope, alternatives, options, empowering them, giving them, the personal responsibility, that is decreasing stigma, in my opinion. Like, that is a way to, and destigmatize people who are taking medications too. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You said the word empowerment, and what I think that's a big piece of it, right? I mean, and that comes from, again, the things that even personally I'm thinking about, I didn't have, of like more knowledge, like the other alternatives that are actually there, right? And how empowering that is. I mean, if that, and what you just said, right, and how that destigmatizes really truly what that does, right? I mean, it feels fantastic when you have options, when you get curious about shit and go, oh my God, I can try something else. I didn't even know that existed. It's never even been laid out for me. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when we try to distill down mental health as, a pill is going to change it instead of working on the human psyche, we've lost so much. Like the human condition is such a big thing to think that a pill is going to change your human condition. Well, it will. But it's not going to be the way that you think,
Yeah.
it's going to numb you out of your human condition. It will prevent you from exploring your own pleasure, all these things. But yet, on TV, it's the happy chemical, right? It's the happy chemical. So a few podcasts ago, I said to Jen, I'm like, we need to find somebody, because I got to ask this question. In psychology, we have to pick a theoretical orientation to hinge on our practice, which is a bunch of bullshit in today's world, that I have to pick some dude from 100 years ago to hinge my practice on. Anyway,
we do. Yep.
yeah.
We're interviewed that way too. We will be asked that when we're interviewed for jobs. What is your theoretical orientation? Yeah. Yeah.
So I was actually interviewed several years ago for like a little part-time gig. It was probably 5 years ago. And the question was, what is your theoretical orientation? And I laughed out loud. And I said, you're still asking people that? I did not get the job. But anyway, probably a good thing.
Probably better.
Yes. Do psychiatrists have some type of theoretical orientation to choose from, or is it all the chemical imbalance theory?
It's pretty much all chemical imbalance theory. So residencies differ depending upon where you do your residency in the United States. Like, some are different, and some have a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. I actually went to my residency was at SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn, and actually they're known as being one of the more like liberal places as far as like they do CBT for psychosis there. That's where I learned, and they do integrate some things in there, not a lot, but a lot more than other places.
Mm-hmm.
But for the 99% of my education was prescribing, was just learning how the drugs work, learning how to diagnose, match a drug. That's it. I mean,
it sounds very scientific, by the way.
Well, what I find
such a dick.
So I have stayed on some traditional psychiatry forums that I was on, like when I was in residency, like the APAs and all those. So I stay in them because I love reading. I love watching like secretly. Yep. But I think I forgot what I was saying. It had something to do with the medication. Oh, I lost it, I think.
Maybe it was about chemical imbalance theory and how, if that orientation is what psychiatry is hinged on, and that has been.
I know what it is.
There you go.
They're all scared shitless about
Oh.
AI taking their jobs. Right?
Well,
I would be
You
too.
can. It's
it's so
possible.
not scientific.
If
It is
that's what
so
you're doing,
not
a
scientific.
robot an AI can certainly do what an average psychiatrist is doing. Certainly.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that is.
and every time that I hear that too, I'm always like, I have job security.
Yeah.
I know that AI can't do what I do. What I do is complicated.
Yeah,
it's
actually
individualized.
To be able to integrate the spiritual and the energetic and all this stuff into the
Yes.
thing, that's not AI. And to
No.
hold the space, which I think the most important thing I even do in my practice is just to hold this safe, I know you guys would probably agree as therapists, like just holding this safe, non-judgmental space. The AI can't do that. So my job security is okay.
Oh my gosh, that's a crazy. That's when you say that statement, I'm like, that's totally doable. I mean, like the idea of that actually happening, and to kind of go back to Terry's like sarcastic comment, but like how non-scientific, right? This process is. I mean, I did not have some brain scan done of my brain to show that like the serotonin, receptors were not activating in the way that they need to, right? Like that wasn't all done, right? So
for all of these people that have ADHD, and I'm like, prove it. Prove it. It's a neurological condition. Then prove it every single time before you prescribe. Prove it.
But we had to ask that question because her and I have talked so much about this, and we're trying to understand, right? Because you're always trying to take truths in all the sides, right? Like that's the whole point, is getting curious about everything. And so we were sitting in this one night going, what would the orientation be then for a psychiatrist? What is that belief system? How could it be hinged on something that's been disproved? How?
Exactly.
Like how can it keep going? Like
repeatedly disproved.
What are we missing, Kendra? What are we missing?
So one of my viral videos was when that big umbrella study came out about the chemical imbalance, and I actually made a video where I apologized too, because I said I'm sorry
video.
for every patient that I ever said had a chemical imbalance, because I did tell people they had chemical imbalances, and I felt so horrible. I mean, even though I knew later on that it wasn't true, but then to have this paper come out and say it was awesome. But going back to me stalking these traditional psychiatry forums, as soon as that came out, I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to see what they're saying." And it was fascinating to me. It was just, I mean, like the psychological things that were going on. It was just like the grasping at straws. Well, it changes the brain structure and maybe the growth of the neurons, and so they just were grasping at straws, sort of trying to come up with any other explanation. And some were outright lying. They were saying, I never said that.
That's the thing. That right there. And I was reading a bunch of things about this when
you can really say that? You can really get in front of a thing and say, I never said that to anyone?
Then why did you keep prescribing if you knew? Because it was like, we've known this. Yeah. We've known this for a long time. This is not new information. I'm like, then why do you keep prescribing?
Yeah, that was the other thing too. Like, I even did a little poll on TikTok where I said, were you told before you started psychiatric medication, were you told you had a chemical imbalance? And I think it came back like 95% of people. So if 95% of people are being told, then where are these doctors that are now? Because they're all saying they didn't say it. So what happened? There's a discrepancy there.
Yeah. So that affirms we aren't missing anything.
No.
Right. Talk about gaslight. That is like, see, this is why we have to keep talking about this shit, because it just blows my mind. Like I can't even, like in our practice, if we would just basically say everything we stand for is actually disproved through research, right? Like we wouldn't stand on that. We wouldn't die on that fucking hill anymore. We'd go find another one, right? We'd go find something else that actually works. So, that's great. Well, I'm glad you affirmed that for us, because we've been racking our brains on this one, Kendra, trying to figure it out, because it's like there's got to be something else we're missing here. So, but we're almost out of time. We've only got a couple minutes left. I'm going to ask you, Kendra, is there anything that is really good for our listeners to know that you didn't get the opportunity to share today, or anything that that you'd like people to know about you?
I don't know anything necessarily about me. I think I just wanted to say, since the topic here is gaslighting, I wanted to just again, apologize to anybody. If anybody sees this and they were my patient from many, many years ago before I knew better, I want to apologize. And I just want to say that, just if you're going to see a psychiatrist or a doctor, just really do so by really, really listening to what they're saying and listening for things that could potentially be sort of like gaslighting or these different things. Be on your, just be really, really, really aware. And to also not let it get to you. Because that's one thing, is that a lot of people accuse me of being hating doctors and hating psychiatrists. And I don't hate doctors and psychiatrists. I do think that they are doing a horrible job often, but I also don't blame them necessarily, because they went through the same training that I had, and they know what they know, but unfortunately it's going to happen, and you're going to get misinformation. You're going to, and you're going to be gaslit if you present any information that is contradictory to what they're saying. And because they always ask me that, people always say, should I just bring all the studies that you talk about to my psychiatrist? And I say, I mean, you can. But I can't guarantee what's going to happen, because how they're going to be receptive to it. But I just want people to know to just keep doing it anyway. And it's not your fault, and it's just, this is the way the system is. And it's not even really their fault. It's just, this is what the broken system is happening. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you. Terry, do you have anything else, or should we wrap up here?
Let's go ahead and wrap up. I'm afraid if I say, we'll cut out again.
Yeah. See how far you can get in the next 10 seconds in the wrap up here. I'm going to give it to you. If you can't do it, I'll do it for you.
Do it, please.
All right, everybody, we're going to close up today. Thank you for listening to us. You are tuning in here to the Gaslit Truth podcast. You can find us anywhere that you go to your favorite podcast, Apple, Spotify. Remember, we're on all the socials, and please subscribe, do all the things. And we want to say thank you to Dr. Kendra Campbell for being on this episode for us. It's very validating to have you here, and it's great that we can all share the space together. So thank you, Kendra.
Thank you guys so much. It was an honor and joy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.